the classical economists who believe that the government should have nothing to do with the economy and that it should be the markets. And when the world economy collapsed in the 1930s, it turned out that that philosophy could not work the way the classical economists had thought. And so this British economist, Lord Keynes, came up with the idea that the government should be involved in the economy. And so his prescription was that government should take active part in the economy, not necessarily in producing goods that are sold in the markets, but the government should be involved in various types of capital projects like road construction, schools, and so on.
So what I'd like to talk about today is transitions, obviously, transitions of power, but also transitions from one condition to another, and our role of public administrators in that. And I will speak about that from a practitioner's perspective. I'd like to start out by describing very briefly the nature of our Canadian Federation for those of you who are not familiar with it. Canada is a federal state with two levels of government, a federal government based in Ottawa and 10 provinces, and there are also 3 northern territories. I am from the province of Ontario, and as you can see from this map, Ontario is the most populous province of Canada, with almost 40% of its population of 33.5 million for the country as a whole. Ontario also has the largest share of Canada's economy at about 37% of the national gross domestic product. The government of Ontario employs 68,000 civil servants directly. I am one of them. And it has an expense budget of about $110 billion, which I worry about a lot in my current position, and I report to Treasury Board and Cabinet regularly about that budget. In terms of the roles and responsibilities of the federal government versus provincial governments, the federal government is responsible for areas of national importance, such as international relations and trade, national defense, criminal law, regulating key sectors such as the banking sector, citizenship, and key national social programs like employment insurance. Provinces are responsible for major expenditure areas such as healthcare, education, social programs, and infrastructure such as highways, and there are areas of shared responsibility such as agriculture and immigration.
Pleased to be here this afternoon to share with this distinguished audience my thoughts about the current global economic crisis and just how this may be redressed. I was not part of the meeting from the start because of other duties out there, and so I suppose that a lot of preliminary information has already been shared, and if I should repeat, I hope you will be able to pardon me. In this presentation, I aim to cast the present global economic crisis in a theoretical and historical perspective and pave the way for the formulation of an appropriate low-risk model for government management of the national financial market with special reference to Africa and Kenya. Even at the global level, Keynesianism expresses itself in terms of multilateral management of the global structure through IMF, World Bank, and so on. This is very well known. Embedded liberalism, state intervention, or Keynesianism, resistance. It was attacked so much, especially in developed countries, ostensibly because it was responsible for the slow economic growth over there at that time. And the argument was simply that it increased expenditure, therefore increased taxes, therefore also increased wages, since Keynesianism was essentially pro-labor, and so on. But state participation in the economy as an investor had introduced unfair competition, and so on. control of prices and so on, interest rates and so forth, amounted to distortion of the market and so on. So for this reason, that system of indebtedness came under attack. The solution was therefore to dismantle it through decontrol, deregulation, privatization, and so on and so forth.
There is the same thing can be said. There's a public sector or a government sector and the private or non-government sector. They are linked. I'm not trying to separate them arbitrarily. Just as the government sector is powerful, because African nations are government nations, because the non-government sector is not really yet very strong. Yet, the government sector, or the non-government sector, beg your pardon, is also very powerful. And this is why in times of crisis, including the economic crisis, human beings return to the non-government sector rather than remain at the government sector. I was interested earlier today when somebody was trying to draw attention, I don't know in which connection, about the cultural dimension of the crisis we are talking about, because that is one dimension of the crisis that we are not dealing with. The other thing is the experiences of ordinary people, the ordinary Africans. Are we really able to capture them in this discourse? I'm not sure. We are dealing mainly at the formal or formalistic arena. Because, at least in my country, and I believe it's also, there's a sense in which crisis is perennial or permanent in our economies. And so there is, for me, sometimes the struggle to understand and explain the absence of crisis and not the presence of crisis. When there's no crisis, I'm more interested. Why is there no crisis? Because you can find crisis virtually in every department, in every domain of our society.